What's up everyone, John here. In today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to starch a cotton dress shirt or other natural material dress shirt. That's an important distinction to make here. I'm going to be using starch, spray starch. This is homemade stuff that I make. You can only starch natural fibers, you can't starch polyester. You can use sizing on polyester. So if you're using polyester, or if you're trying to iron and add some body to a polyester garment, then you need to use fabric sizing, not spray starch. But besides that, you can use sizing on cotton as well, so it's a little more universal. Spray starch is a little cheaper, especially if you make it yourself. This is my own mix. This is 1 heaping tablespoon of cornstarch into 3 cups of boiling water. It needs to be boiling. I like to mix the starch in while the water is cold and then bring it to a boil. Prevents clumping. And once that's all mixed up, I let it cool down and I add 2 ounces of alcohol. That makes it stable at room temperature. 2 ounces of 91% rubbing alcohol. It brings the alcohol content up to the point that it's lethal to yeast, and it also kills bacteria, so it's shelf stable at that point. I've had it last for months. It works great. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. So the amount of time it's going to take you if you're inexperienced with this is probably going to be 10 minutes to 15 minutes, just depending on how everything works out with you, the quality of your shirt, and how well each panel lays, things like that. Usually if you're experienced with this, it'll take you 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to be talking you through this, so it'll probably take me a little longer. We're going to start out on the front here, and we're going to double starch the placket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it over this way. The placket is the part where the buttons poke through. It's the part with the buttonholes, okay? That's what we call the placket. I'm just going to lay this out flat. Just a good 1-2. We're going to do the same thing on the front. And what this does is it's just going to add a lot more body to the fabric. And even if you're using a steam iron, and by the way, if you're doing this, you should not be using the steam function. You should have it turned off. Wetting your clothes beforehand just does a better job than steaming them. The fibers soak up the moisture and then they take a set, and it just gives them a little more bounce, so they'll return to their shape. They will hold their press a little better if you wet them. But adding a little bit of starch in there just gives your clothes a little more body. So we'll go ahead, see how that's doing. We're going over that one more time just to make sure it's good and dry. Alright, let's spray down the rest of the shirt here. Normally I would do that all in one thing. I just forgot to do it that time. So normally I would have sprayed down the placket and the front panel all at the same time. I just overlooked that this time. Let's go ahead and let's get the pocket. And when we're working on the pocket, we want to bring our iron up around the seam and then inward each time, alright? And then we're going to come up over it like this. We're just going to flatten that out, run that iron over. We're not going to press too hard because we don't want to pull that pocket up and distort it. There we go. That's our pocket pressed. Alright, let's go ahead and rotate that, and you could probably hear and see it sticking to the ironing board a little bit. That's because of that starch. This is a fairly lightweight starch. I guess I shouldn't say light. This may be a light to medium weight starch. The back panel. And this is where things start speeding up a little bit. These panels, especially the back panels, where you're going to be sitting on them, there's not a lot of use worrying about getting these things stiff and rigid. You just want to get them a little bit damp, get the fibers damp, so they'll just sort of spring back and hopefully won't wrinkle so bad. And if you're wondering, the shirt that I'm wearing right here is starched. You can see it's got a nice drape to it, and that's one of the things that starching does. It just gives your shirt a little bit better drape, a little more body as it drapes off of you. So let's go ahead. You can see here how we've got like little puckers and things like that in there, even after I straighten it out. And once it's being wet and ironed, and like I said, spraying your shirt is far superior to using steam, even if you have a good steam iron. This is about a $50 iron here, and it still is better just to use water on it, in my experience. It is good if you're doing this, especially if you're going to be applying a lot to it and there's going to be a lot of moisture in your garment. It's a good idea to get a good iron that's got a pretty good heating element in it and a little bit of mass to it, so it doesn't cool off so quick. You want an iron that can keep up with what you're throwing at it. Alright, so this panel's done. Let's do our front panel, and then we're done with the body of the shirt. Okay? Alright. Front panel, and I'm not going to concern myself too much with what's down here at the bottom. This is all stuff that's not going to be seen. The stuff towards the bottom isn't. It's going to be tucked in. Like I said, I do all my shirts like this. I starch all of my shirts and iron all of my shirts, at least the ones that are a little nicer. I shouldn't say nicer. The ones that I wear when I dress up is a better explanation for that. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's do our collar and spray the front and the back. And the reason for this is because it's the same reason spray both sides on the placket. This is actually 2 layers of fabric sewn together, and I want to get both sides, and that just gives a little more stiffness and rigidity. The purpose of having the 2 pieces sewn together is to give it, well, one, to hide the seam on the inside, but also to give it a little more structure, and we're just adding even more by adding a little bit of starch to it. So we're going to slow down and set that starch in it. Okay. That's good. It's still a little bit damp. I may have to go over that a little more in a little bit. We'll move on and we'll see how it holds up. Now, to do the sleeves, what we want to do is we want to find the flat felt seam on the bottom. You'll see there's going to be, or the seam on the bottom. On a lot of dress shirts, especially work shirts and shirts that are a little more casual, you'll see a flat felt seam. There'll be 2 stitches. But we want to find the seam that runs from the armpit to the cuff. Alright? We're going to take that. I find it just works to drag the shirt along that, straighten that out. And if your shirt is decently made, or if it's assembled pretty well straight, then once you do this, you should end up with a crease that runs with the grain of the fabric, and you can see this one does that. So you can see we've got the checkered pattern that runs perpendicular, or parallel, perpendicular, either way. It can be both in this case, I guess, but it runs with the fabric. Okay, so just put a couple squirts on there, just add a little bit of moisture to it. Not really too concerned about the starch in this. The only place I really concern myself with getting a substantial amount of starch into the shirt is in the collar, on the cuffs, and in the placket. And I don't even worry about the cuffs too much. I usually don't do the cuffs because for my own wear, I wear a watch, and the watch causes them to bunch up. So it usually is not very beneficial to me to do that. So there's one sleeve done. Let's go ahead and do the cuff while we're at it. Just one, just like that. About a half a spray. And we're going to start at the buttonhole. We're going to lay it out flat, and we're going to use just the tip of the iron. And we're going to bring it back to the button. And we're going to stop at the button. There's no point in getting around the button, because that's just going to be covered up. And you want to just use the tip of the iron, because we don't want to distort the fabric by trying to flatten the whole thing out. This is, I have a little bit of a crease in there on accident. So let's move that out of the way. Try to straighten that out. Alright. That's good. You can see that. Let's do the other one. The other sleeve, we're going to once again fold around the seam. Now if you've got a flat felt seam like this, what you're going to find is that with one side, the flat felt seam is going to face up, the other side is going to face down if you're hanging it off of the same side of the ironing board. So this time the seam is facing up where it's a flat felt seam. So let's go ahead, pinch this. We're just going to pull that up, and this will give you a good little crease to go off of. It's worth noting that if you have a polyester shirt will take a permanent crease, and you might have a crease left over from your last time you've ironed it. In that case, you should not do this, and you should go with the original crease in the shirt. Otherwise, you're on the risk of making multiple creases that don't line up down the sleeve, and that looks worse than not having them creased at all. So you need to keep that in mind. Polyester will take a permanent set. And in fact, if you know what you're doing, you can actually work that to your advantage and permanent press your poly closed. So say you're dealing with a poly blend of 40% to 60%, a 40 poly 60 cotton blend shirt. What's going to happen is your polyester in that shirt will actually retain a set. It's a plastic, polyester is, and it takes a thermal set when you iron, especially if you don't use steam. Now you can make that set fall out with steam. It's just like if you drop a piece of foreign plastic into boiling water, it'll relax with the stresses in the plastic and it'll lose its shape. And the same thing will happen with this. So if you have a polyester shirt, you want to make sure you don't use steam if you're setting a crease. If you're trying to remove a crease or remove wrinkles, steam is your friend. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and let's do our collar. Or our cuff, I mean. We're going to start once again at the buttonhole. I'm just going to start working back towards the button. Careful not to iron in any wrinkles into this. This is a fairly casual cotton shirt. It doesn't have any interfacing underneath the cuff, and in the collar, so you can actually cause the fabric to shift, the layers of fabric to shift on one another and cause wrinkles and stuff between the layers. So we want to avoid that. So be careful with that. And that's another cuff done. So that, I believe, is pretty much it. You can see now we've got a shirt that's got some decent body in this, and as I showed it to you before, it was ironed, it just wasn't starched. But this time I went over it and ironed it and I starched it to let you guys see what starch does. And you can see that it's got a pretty good bit of body right there. The collar isn't floppy. This is just a thin, there's no interfacing in here, but it still holds its shape. All right. Same thing for the cuffs. The cuffs hold their shape and they're not terribly floppy. Like I said, it's kind of useless for me because of where I wear a watch, but if you don't wear a watch and you want your cuff to look crisp like this, on this side it does help with that arm, then you can do that. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave it a like down below. I'll see you in the next one. Later.